Hey, and welcome to episode number 122 of The Brave Widow Show. Today, I talk with Benjamin, and he shares his story about being a widower and having kids while also losing his wife. And before we dive into his story, if you are listening real time, meaning that you are listening when this podcast comes out, Tuesday, November the 5th, that this is the start of our Grief to Growth challenge, our 3-day challenge here at Brave Widow. It's absolutely free. You can get access to the replays. To sign up, just go to bravewidow.com/challenge. Today is election day here in the United States, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of all the election noise, of all the political information, of all the political calls and texts and everything that's coming through that just feels like you're being bombarded with every single day. If you would like something else to think about, or if you are ready to learn about grief myths, about how to break free from guilt and grief, we're even going to talk about dating and guilt and grief with new relationships. Then you want to join me at bravewidow.com/challenge. All right, let me introduce you to Benjamin. Benjamin is a father of 3 kids and a business owner. He was married for 21 years before losing his wife to amyloidosis in 2021. All right, let's jump into Benjamin's story. Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the show and being willing to share your story today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I know our audience would love to learn more about you and your background, and then we can just dive into your story wherever you'd like.
Okay. I'm Benjamin. I'm in Austin, Texas. I've been in Texas my whole life, but I've not been in Austin very long. I've only been here for a little over 3 years, but I'm widowed for almost 3 years. This December will be 3 years. So we moved here. I moved here with my wife and our kids, and then I lost her a short time later. So an interesting beginning to moving to a new city. But we didn't move that far away. We came from Houston, which is only about a little over 3 hours away.
It still can feel like a totally different universe. I don't know if what they say about Austin is true, but I hear it's a little bit different world down there in that part of Texas anyway.
It is. Yeah, I don't know if we have any Texas listeners, but I think that the four major cities in Texas are like a family and family members, rather. Dallas is like the father, very formal, proper, and Houston is like the rebellious son who makes it all and loses it all and makes it back. Um, and I think San Antonio is like the mom, come sit down, have some comfort food. And then Austin is the creative, very artsy sister or
Mm.
daughter. So they're all very different, the four Texas cities, but they all have their pluses.
Yeah, that's interesting. I went to San Antonio last year and then I've been to Dallas many times. So I haven't hit the other two recently, but I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, yeah.
So share with us a little bit about how you and your wife met and maybe what were you really drawn to her about? What were some qualities she had that you just really fell in love with?
Yeah, so the joke that we always used to say is that I was given her number a year before I called her. The joke with guys is like, when you get a girl's number, when should you call? 2 days later? Should you call a week later? And I joked that I waited.
A year?
Um,
Did you really wait a year?
yeah, I did wait a year, but there's a good reason for that. I was living and working in Dallas and really had no plans to leave Dallas at all. And liked it there. I grew up in Houston and I went to college in Dallas and I just really liked the city and like working there. But I traveled a lot. And so somebody back home, I think my mother had a friend who gave me her number, my wife's number. And my wife she grew up in Houston, but we didn't know each other. We were the same age, but we just grew up in different parts of the city, but knew some of the same people, as it later turned out. But I was given her number and I didn't really know I didn't know who she was at all, but I was given her number and I was like, why would I call someone in another city? This makes no sense. It's hard enough to get a date in town. Why would I want to date somebody out of town? And so about a year later, I got assigned to a client in Houston, actually the north part of Houston. And so it was suggested to me, oh, you should give that girl a call. I'm like, I got her number a year ago. I think we've missed the window. And they're like, no, you should call. I'm like, okay. So I called, and I'd been on a lot of like blind dates, and they were pretty uncertain and disastrous in some ways. And so I really didn't have high expectations at all. I mapped out like where I was going to take her. I was going to take her to the Starbucks right around the corner from her house. And I showed up wearing like some tattered khakis and some beat up boots. And I think I was visiting and so I didn't have my car because I flew into Houston. So I actually borrowed my mother's car, and she had a car seat in the back for my niece. So I was doing everything I could do to not impress her because I was okay, fine, I'll call her. And when she opened the door, I was just like, oh God, I wore the wrong thing. Like I've made a grave mistake here. But needless to say, I changed the venue of the date. We did go to Starbucks. We went to a nice cafe and we had a 4 hour date. And I knew by the end of the night that was who I was going to marry. And from there it was just a quick engagement, and we were married for 21 years. We knew each other for 22. And we were just a great team, just aligned in a lot of ways, aligned in terms of just our goals and finances and religion and parenting, just a really good team.
That's amazing. What are some of her qualities that really stand out to you that you really liked about her?
I think she was calm. I later learned out she wasn't. She was a warrior, but she didn't tend to get caught up in a lot of the drama of other situations. So I just like the calm about her and just the kindness. She was just really kind. I remember she would like volunteer even when we were older, and she would volunteer at school to be like work as a room mom or something like that. And she'd always, hey, can you read this email? Can you make sure I'm not, offending anybody? She was just like, just was that way. Just did not, she was sensitive, but she also was sensitive to others. And I think that was just something where we really matched up well. And that was definitely a quality I was drawn to.
She sounds like just a beautiful person inside and out. And 21 years together these days, that's really a feat. I'm glad that you did have that time together.
Yeah. No, it's a good point you make. I think as you get to know other widows and widowers, some are together longer and some are together much shorter. I've met some where they hadn't even finished getting the thank you cards out from their wedding, and they were already in the hospital and dealing with the health issues. We can definitely dwell on the negative, but if 21 is a long time. It's not long enough, but it's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. The two of you have kiddos together.
Yes. Yeah, we had 3 kids, 21-year-old son, 18-year-old son, and a 13-year-old daughter.
Okay. So
And
you've got your hands full.
yeah, I laugh because the raising a boy playbook is totally different than the raising a daughter. And it's like, gosh, why do I get the joy of raising a daughter by myself without my wife? I've accepted it and I definitely take it seriously, but definitely the hardest chapter is raising a daughter, especially being opposite genders, but there's positives too.
Yeah, definitely. And I was talking with actually a client that I have earlier today about when we both have boys and girls, and it's a challenge because you want to be everything to your kids and you want to be able to give them everything as if their other parent was there. And we just feel limited in some ways of I have three boys and a girl. When you have boys, you want them to be around other men and you want them to learn about those things. And yeah,
Mhm.
mom can take you to ball games, but it's not the same completely. So that is
Right.
definitely a struggle. And having a teenage girl, I feel for you. It's a struggle for me. Do you mind to share how your wife died and some of the events that led up to that?
Yeah, I think she started, I can trace it back to where she wasn't feeling well at times, but it was very intermittent. And probably around 2019, 2020, it was just like once a month or so, just some discomfort, and then it would quickly go away. And she couldn't put her finger on it. And she was extremely health conscious. I felt like she knew her body. And as we got into the end of 2020 and really beginning of 2021, it really ramped up to where it was more constant. And we were about to move to Austin. And then our oldest was graduating from high school that spring. And she just wasn't feeling well all year leading up to the move in July. And so we moved to Austin in July, and then we got our son settled into college. And then after that, it was weird. It's like after it's almost like she willed herself to get him into college, like to move him in. And then after that, I really felt like that's when I became probably a single father or solo dad because I was making all the lunches and just getting the kids to school. And we continued to go to doctors, but nobody could really figure out what it was. And then the end of October, a primary care doctor in Austin finally zeroed in and said, I think I know what it is, and it's called amyloidosis. It's a very rare disease, but it's like a blood cancer, but not really. It's your body starts making proteins, but they're not folded down correctly, and so they start getting deposited to different parts of the body. And you shut down the production of them using chemotherapy, but you can't really clean them up. It doesn't really clean the cancer, if you will. The damage has already been done. And so she was in line for a heart transplant. It had damaged her heart. And so we were going to race against time. It was like, can we get the proteins levels down low enough in order to get the heart transplant? And so we were making good strides. We had to move. It was crazy. We moved to Austin in July. She got diagnosed in October. We immediately ran down back to Houston, the two of us, and because they had a center of excellence for this disease, and she wanted to stay close to the doctors there, and so it was hard because I had to leave two kids in Austin and they were bouncing around to different people's houses. And finally, I was able to come back and forth and split the week with the kids and then my wife. And then we had this plan that after the winter break, we would, even though we had just moved to Austin, that we'd move the kids and myself down to Houston into an apartment so we could be there with her every day for treatment because I felt like the kids really needed to see their mom, even if she wasn't well enough. Like just the idea that they could just run 10 minutes down the street and see her, I felt like that was important versus being 3 hours away. And so we're just trying to finish the semester and get into winter break to be able to make this happen. And then I was there for a treatment, was and then I said goodbye and I was heading back to Austin. And then that night she had a cardiac event and we lost her. And so I was with the kids in Austin when it happened, and her family was with her. Her dad was with her and her stepmother. And that was just sudden. I think even the doctors were surprised because we were making progress with the treatment. They were having to tweak the heart every week with different medications, but it was just, hey, can we strike this good balance until we can get a heart transplant? I think that was the idea. But so to lose her, I think was a surprise to not just to us, but also to the doctors treating her. And so I think that part was just probably the biggest thing to get our mind around. I'm still getting my mind around it 3 years later.
It had to be just incredibly overwhelming to be running a business, juggling the schedule of three kids, teenagers, young adults, which can be hectic anyway, and then having the worry of your wife being 3 hours away and just feeling, I would imagine you probably just felt like you couldn't be everything to any one person. Like that just had
Right.
to be really incredibly hard.
Yeah. I remember at the time just wondering how this is all going to play out, but I was managing it somehow. I don't know. I think talk to other widows and widowers and those who have gone through a stretch where or dealt with a situation where their spouse was sick. We talk about there's that energy level that you access where it's almost like you have like superpowers where you're like juggling so many different things, and that's, looking back, that's true love, just to try to to make it all work and lean on people who you can trust. But yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. So what were the next couple weeks, couple of months like? And you might not be able to remember much. A lot of times it's just a blur, but did you feel like you had a lot of support from family and friends, or did you have to figure out, how to juggle it all on your own? What did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's a blur. I remember there's just certain pieces to it. I was always a hands-on dad. I helped my wife a lot. So it wasn't like I was this dad that traveled all week and all of a sudden I was like, I had no idea what was going on. I had a pulse on the house, if you will, and the kids. So so I knew how to do that. I didn't cook very well, but I knew how to do all the other things. You're just in shock. And you're just like, you're sad and you get periods where you don't feel like getting up but you do. And if you get the kids out the door, get them to school and you can do some work, that was a good day, or not a good day, but that was like an accomplishment. But I think I learned how to, there were some relatives that were able to step up and help me. Thought about what would it have looked like had we been in Houston still, where we had a lot of friends. And I'm not the kind of person that like I don't love asking for help. So that was like probably my biggest lesson to learn. But I kind of learned how to like get help when I needed for the kids, getting sitters or getting like college students to pick up my daughter from school and then take her to different activities so I could continue working. But really just that was it was just how can I get the system down to a daily system with the kids? And that took, I mean, honestly, it took years. I'm in year three. I feel like we didn't get some semblance of routine until something like deep into year two. And I think the one thing that so I'm talking about like managing kids and managing the house. And initially, after it happened, I think that was extremely hard. And each kid reacted differently, including myself. So that was like one piece. The other piece is just what were things like after it happened for me personally. I think every widow and widower probably realizes. Some may realize the next day, or some may realize a year later. But for me, about a month in, about mid-January, when the kids went back to school, I took a walk around the neighborhood and I realized, oh, I've had people checking in on me. I've had friends calling, people visiting. You get everyone kind of experiences that initial, like everyone wants to help and immediately thereafter. But then when people went back to their work and their lives, and I had to just forge ahead. And it was really just for us, it coincided with the kids all going back to school. That's when I realized, oh, okay, I have to do this myself. Like whatever grief looks like, I can't go around it. I can't go under it. And whatever I do, I'm doing it by myself. Like I can pick up a phone and call a friend, but at the end of the day, I'm the one doing the work. I'm the one that has to endure all the pain and really the recovery to some degree. And so that for me, that was like a seminal moment a month later.
Mm. Yeah. And I'm glad that you recognize that's something you'd have to work through because I think some people really try to suppress it or just ignore it or think, oh, if I just give it enough time, just magically I'm going to feel better. And it's just not always the reality of that. How did you balance? I know a lot of people struggle with this too, the grief of your kids and being there for them, and then also feeling like you had the space and time to grieve on your own and that you didn't have to not put on a face. You could just breathe and just exist and grieve in your own way. How did you try to balance that?
Yeah, it was hard because I think each kid was different and they were all three different ages and they're all three different personalities and three different stages of their life. One in college, one in high school, one in elementary, going in the middle, and those are three different places. When I sit down and think about who I was as a person in all three of those stages, gosh, I would have interpreted the loss of a parent like so differently at all three ages. So I think my biggest strength, whether I developed it or had a little bit of it and honed it, was picking up on my kids' moods. Like the quicker I could pick up on their mood and read the room, the better. And when I didn't, or when I missed it, or when something was going on at work or something that really distracted me, that's when I don't want to say I paid for it, but that's when I saw the consequences. Okay, I didn't see that one. And you're not going to catch them all, but that was the biggest thing. Some kids needed therapy, or some kids needed therapy but didn't want to go to therapy and tried it and it didn't work. That's I've tried to give them all the resources they need. That's how I handled their grief, and just being open and talking about their mom and figuring out which kids were okay with me talking about their mom and which kids weren't. I have one child that you only talk about mom in a funny way if there's a funny story, but you can't get I have one kid where you just can't get serious, or you can't get sappy, or you can't go and delve deep. But that's okay. That's what that child can handle. And over time that will change, I'm sure. But for myself, in terms of I'm fortunate that I own my own business, and so I think there were times where I wasn't like in an office building environment to where I don't know. I really feel for the people that work in an environment where they maybe can't step away and take a moment or an hour or a couple hours. Um, so I was able to do that at times, whether it was go take a walk or meet someone for coffee. And I use the summers, honestly, to do a lot of work on myself just because they're off doing their activities or at sleepaway camp. And so those were times where I would take an extra effort to work on myself a little bit.
I love that you thought about each kid differently and not only just as individuals, but where they were in their life and trying to pick up on what they're comfortable with and not, because you have a lot going on in those first few months and even that first year. So it can be really challenging to do all of that. And obviously, owning your own business, I think in some ways it comes with a lot of flexibility, and in other ways, is a tremendous amount of pressure at the same time, too. Yeah, I definitely commend you for that. What advice would you give to other widows and widowers on how to get through those first months, the first couple of years, or maybe as you've noticed your kids are getting older and they're figuring out this new life? Any advice that you would share with others?
Yeah, I think if you're in the first year, there's my basic things. I think if you're in your first year, like your priorities need to be get enough to eat and get enough sleep. And that's not easy. And it sounds easy, but it's not. In the first year, you tend to eat too much or you tend to not eat enough. And then it's really hard to get sleep. It's just getting like a very light sleeping pill at night from a doctor that has no side effects. I forget the name of it, but just getting that quality sleep or as much as you can, I think that kind of allows you to tackle the other things like your kids or work or handling your grief. I think so. If you're in year one, you just need to be like, I need to get through the next minute, and then I'll go to the next minute. And once I'm better at managing minutes, then I'm going to manage the next hour. I'm just going to take it 1 hour at a time to when you graduate to one day at a time. And there's no rush to get there. And but I think that's the advice I'd give someone in the first year. And also year is a year first. It's in my case, the first Mother's Day that my kids and I all celebrate and my wife's not there and their mother's not there. That's just one example. You're going to go through that first holiday without them. And what I found in the first year was that immediately I thought way far ahead. What are we going to do Mother's Day? And it was like 7 months away. And what I learned was like, don't think about it. Wait till it gets closer and then make your decision on based on how you feel and how your kids feel. Because it's like thinking about step number 25 and you're only on step 3. So I think as you get more years into your being a widow or widower, you're able to contemplate those holidays a little more in advance and think through them because you have a few under your belt. But I think the first year, you need to take the expectations like completely down to zero and really just take it one day at a time.
That's really great advice. And for some people, that's really hard to do is give yourself grace and lower the expectations that you have for yourself and give yourself permission to do something different for a holiday or start a new tradition or just tell family and friends, sorry, I can't host this year, like whatever that is and whatever that looks like for them, that it's okay to figure it out as you go. And just because you do something different this year doesn't mean next year it has to be the same way. But it's a difficult journey that we're walking on, especially that first year. And it's okay that people are still figuring that out over time.
Absolutely.
Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the show today and just being willing to share your story. I appreciate you being vulnerable and helping to encourage and inspire other widows and widowers out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Let me help others. Appreciate it.
Are you a widow who feels disconnected? Do you feel like you're stuck or even going backwards in your grief? Widowhood can be lonely and isolating, but it doesn't have to be. Join us in the Brave Widow membership community and connect. We teach widows how to find hope, heal their heart, and dream again for the future. Find your purpose and create a life you love today. Go to bravewidow.com to get started.